Hi everyone, it's Susan again, and today I would like to broach the energy of the week, of this moment in time, of this period that we're living through. And I am going to take a look at the Saturn Stationing Direct chart with you. Before I do, I wanted to say a few words about Saturn, which honestly I think is a reflection of life itself. Of course, all of the astrological symbolism is a reflection of life itself. It's all there teaching us some aspect of our lives. Saturn is the aspect of life which is the truth of the challenge of life itself. All life is, in some form or another, going to entail suffering. So that does not mean we should cause suffering, especially not knowingly. What that means is, just as the Buddha enunciated in the Four Noble Truths, that if you are alive, there will be suffering. And to keep yourself alive, there will be suffering. And this doesn't matter if you're the most self-righteous vegan on the face of the earth and you think you're doing no harm. You will still have to somehow sacrifice the life of another being, sentient or otherwise. All things are sentient and in the realm of the universe in some form or another. We just don't recognize it as such, but that entails some kind of suffering. So for each of us to be here, to be breathing, to be eating, to be walking the earth, something else has to go as a consequence. And this is the ultimate meaning of all life entails suffering. Whenever I say something like this, there's always somebody that pipes up and says, I have a great life. And that's wonderful for you. But I would say that you're either bypassing a bit of it, if not a lot of it, or you are delusional. And it is really helpful to recognize where suffering exists, because when we pretend it doesn't, we're really just going to project that onto other people. And when we don't take care of our own suffering and we don't acknowledge the difficulties and the emotions that we're experiencing, we'll simply project it out. We see this around us now in multiple ways around the world. The suffering that was not digested, that was not understood, the traumas that have not been understood get acted out, whether in the same lifetime or in future generations. Every astrological chart tells the story of layers of generations. When I look at this chart in front of me for the Saturn station, I'm using Greenwich Mean Time, so that's universal time because people are listening in from all around the world. So that's going to be 7 o'clock on the 4th of November. But this gives us a sun conjunct the ascendant almost to the minute in Scorpio. So there's literally a 12 arc minute difference between the ascendant and the sun. And if I were going to be really precise down to the second, it might have even been closer. But I just brought it down to the minute. So here we are with an ascendant and a sun in Scorpio on the day that Saturn is stationing direct. And if this chart was not going to be enough to tell us, we know that just a sun and ascendant in Scorpio is a difficult moment to be born. Anybody with this configuration will have some kind of crisis or death or suffering, some absence of the father, absence of protection of the father, absence of integrity potentially, hypocrisy being rife in the family. This is the energy of such a chart in a person's life, and this is what we're dealing with collectively. So I find it fascinating that this is actually where we end up with the ascendant at this time. And I just want you to get a visual. So if you're only listening to my voice right now, just have a look at the video and just observe the crisscrossing of oppositions. And it's almost beautiful. And yet, of course, it's telling us a visual story of how many tensions there are at the moment and how difficult this situation is to grapple with. We have one trine One really weak trine, which I don't really count because it's far too. It's a 4 degree difference essentially between Venus and Uranus. So I'm just going to ignore that for now. But the very tight trine is 2.5 degrees between Venus and Pluto, which is intense. It's obsessional. It's about control. It's about trying to operate within relationship in a way that you dominate and control. And so, again, just because something is in opposition doesn't necessarily make it bad. And just because something is a trine doesn't necessarily make it look good either. So just again, to emphasize that I'm just trying to get you in touch with the energy of the aspects of the chart first, from a purely visual level, but also recognizing that the red and the tension does not always necessarily have to mean worst case scenario. We also have an opposition, for example, between Venus and Neptune, and it's very, very strong. It's within 24 arc minutes of a degree, less than half of a degree of opposition. And this is where we find hope. It can be delusional. It can absolutely be about not seeing what we don't want to see. There's a lot of that. And yet it can also bring us hope and profound compassion with the sun and ascendant in Scorpio. And especially so with Mars and Mercury conjunct those points. It's intense times where there's a lot of hatred. Again, this would show up in a personal chart. Vindictiveness, hatred, an eye for an eye, the Hammurabi Code, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. When does it end? As the saying goes, the whole world goes blind. Maybe it was Gandhi who said that, I can't remember. So the point being that we're in these really intense times, and it's not always, these things are not always easy to parse out because we're in a very intense period of humanity. But if I come back to the energy of Saturn as really resembling the effort and difficulties of life, the suffering of life, we recognize that it's also the necessary stuff of life to experience some kind of challenge. As human beings, we're configured for challenge. We very recently, maybe a few decades of our lives, perhaps so those of you born, say, in the last 30, 35 years, have known quite a lot of ease. That's not the way life goes. This is a blip. It's an unusual moment in time. And that's no disrespect for those of you who have not experienced a life of ease. I'm thinking more in terms of the comforts and safety that most people are able to live in the modern world, due to technology, due to consumer comforts, and so on. And this is very new. And throughout time, life has entailed effort and danger and a lot of competition and a lot of risk-taking. And that is what we're configured for, to the extent that when we don't have it, we go looking for it. So people whose lives are too comfortable, they start to do things like jumping out of airplanes for fun. Or they will, like if you look at the royals around the world, royal families are so comfortable that they start to live in a debauched, depraved way, just to feel something, just to experience something intense. Too much comfort leads to an immorality, because we lose touch with what we need to sacrifice in a metaphysical way as well as in a physical way to simply be alive. If we go with this kind of Disney world vision of life entailing only comfort and joy and nice things, then we lose touch with what it means to actually sacrifice. We become selfish and narcissistic. We want everything to be a particular way. And when it's not, then we get angry. And that's because we're not channeling that effort, that the energy of effort into something that is more important, more life-saving, perhaps. So the energy of negative emotions is inescapable. The people who are living in the world of everything is fabulous, I only look at the positive, I never go near the negative, those are often the people who radiate the most anger, the most, let's call it unconscious or hidden anger. And the shadow comes out. People can see it. It'll come out in Starbucks when the coffee order is wrong, or it'll come out in the car when somebody cuts them off. But in their persona, in their image of themselves, they don't have anger. They don't understand what it means to be angry because they're never associating with negativity. Saturn says, this is what life is all about. Get used to it. Make peace with the difficulties of life. Saturn is stationing at 0 degrees of Pisces, 30 minutes. So in the first half of a degree of Pisces, where it was in the second week of March. Very quickly, from the 7th of March, Saturn moved along. And so let's say early March, this is exactly where Saturn was. And we're going right back there. And before we got to this point, we went through a whole journey from the 0 degree point to the 7 degree point in Pisces. And that was between 7th of March and the 17th of June of 2023. And then from the 17th of June, Saturn stationed retrograde, but essentially throughout June, Saturn was at 7 degrees. It takes a while for it to shift and turn direction. And so we also have Saturn at the 0 degree point, very intense point in Pisces for a long time. And it's been like this for a couple of weeks already. And it will be at this point for another couple of weeks before we see any substantial shift. So for all intents and purposes, for about a month, Saturn is just where it is right now, energetically. And this brings on a lot of intensity, a lot of questioning. Saturn in Pisces often, and I speak as one person who has Saturn in Pisces natally, my second Saturn return is next year. That is often a life that is considered very difficult. It can feel like life is too hard. It can feel like it's just endless challenges and that one doesn't feel equipped because the material world feels so hard. Saturn is all about very tangible, practical, life-sustaining things. And Pisces is, let's say, not. Pisces is the energy of spirit, and it's the energy of consciousness. It's about unity. It can be an energy where we bypass any responsibility in the material world, and Piscean energy is known for disappearing when things get difficult, or avoiding challenges. So when we have Saturn going through Pisces, we get confronted with all of this. Now, collectively, we're being confronted with all of this. What have we been avoiding? What have we been procrastinating, knowing full well that it requires real world attention, but it comes from a metaphysical or a spiritual or a collective energy? What are we not doing collectively that we now need to really take action on? For me, this Saturn in Pisces is, of course, about finding boundaries and finding a way to channel, let's say, or to integrate the energy of mystical consciousness, more spiritual energy. Pisces represents Christ, the energy of Christ, the energy of sacrifice. Shiva is another way of describing Piscean energy, which is all about beginnings and endings. And that sacrifice, again, is a reference to Saturn, which is what are we going to do so that we can actually understand better how to access spirit while in form, while we're living in this world of form. And now we've had these months, 7 months, basically, to really examine that question and to try to understand what it is that we learned from that and what it is we need to do to go forward. For those of you who have 0 to 7 degrees, or even I would say 0 to 9 degrees of Pisces, and even if you're in the last couple of degrees of Aquarius, you will have felt this quite intensively. That would also apply to any of the water signs in terms of change, but most especially to the mutable signs. So Pisces is mutable water, and then we have Gemini, mutable air, and we have Virgo, mutable earth, and we have Sagittarius, which is mutable fire. And those signs will have also been provoked in a way that requires some change between the 0 and 9 degree mark. You can have a look at my video from several months ago on Saturn going through Pisces to see a little bit more about where that takes place. I'm not going to go sign by sign in this particular video. And for those of you who only watch the videos that are sign by sign, that's something maybe you could reflect upon as well. If it's only ever about you and what you need to know just for your little corner of the world, are you forgetting how you fit into the rest of the world? It's Saturn in Pisces is showing us that we have to fit into the rest of the world. We can't separate ourselves out. We can't just be all me, me, me. It's not possible. We need to understand how to be integrated in this world. Collectively, that is something we can't deny. We are. It's not whether you like it or not. It's not whether you want that or not. It's just the way we are. Saturn is showing us in Pisces that things have consequences that affect us all. Pisces is also obviously all about water, and it reflects the oceans. And Saturn in Pisces, especially with Neptune there as well, is often associated with issues around water, difficulties around water of all kinds, whether that be poisonings or contaminated water through pollution, all kinds of deluges and tsunamis and things like that throughout time are associated with Saturn and Pisces, and of course Neptune and Pisces as well. The Neptune energy is also representing oil and what comes from under the ground, much like Pluto and much like Saturn has always done traditionally. So these energies currently now are also pointing to how we collectively breathe the same air. We are reliant upon the same water. And so Saturn going through Pisces concerns all of us. We have to take in a bigger picture and make sense of that, make that apply to our everyday lives. So the me, me, me stuff, it's not serving you ultimately. Seems like it in the short run, but it's not serving you. And that's fundamentally what I'm trying to get through here with the Saturn in Pisces. We're in this together. Let's say we're all in the same boat, quite literally, with Saturn in Pisces. So I want to point out a few other aspects of the chart. Just let me check in case, because I wrote some notes down. It's hard. I'm finding that I'm not alone, I'm sure, in this, but I'm finding it very difficult to verbalize and to make sense of what is going on now, because it's so huge. Genocide is another energy of Pisces, and Saturn in Pisces often also corresponds to genocide. We are witnessing genocide. We're sitting in the middle of it, and we're watching the Scorpio sun and ascendant together. We're watching that the father is not there to protect. The father is absent. There's nothing in any of our leadership that is genuinely taking action to prevent a situation which is leading us all down a very dangerous path. And so we're looking at a situation that emotionally is incredibly hard and very difficult to grapple with psychologically. This is also, for me, one of the meanings here of the Venus in opposition to Neptune. And it's difficult to grapple with this. Neptune is in a very weak trine to Mercury. Things are super unclear. Communication, especially trying to understand what's going on, is not clear. Mercury in Scorpio, ruled by Mars, right next to it, represents secrets, subterfuge, things that are not obvious, things that are not clear. Mars right next door to it is suggesting some other energy of malevolence, and when that is in a trine to Neptune, which itself is also sextiling Uranus, this is very, very difficult to rely on. Even our own mind becomes difficult to rely on. It's difficult to find words because this is so massive that words fail. Coming back to that notion of projection, where there's so much hatred, so much judgment. If you're finding yourself judging people based on their personalities, whether they be political leaders or otherwise, you have to check your projections. When you're judging situations based on your feelings about it, based on your personal preferences, then you really need to check your projections, because these are very big, complex issues, and there is so much to take in. And yet, when we strip it way back and we understand our morality, when we understand our virtues, what we stand for, what we believe in, we always know what is right. The righteous walk the earth in every lifetime. And they suffer more than anyone. They're often the first ones to be condemned because they speak the truth, and the truth is Pisces, that energy of truth, the Jupiter ruled Pisces. There are biblical truths, there are Quranic truths, there are Vedic truths. These are truths that are common to all of us. Christian truth, traditionally, and especially coming from the Old Testament, which is often used as justification for some of the events that we're seeing now, ultimately pointed to caring for the weak and poor, caring for those who require some kind of protection. We see with this chart, they're not getting it. We're not getting it. And we've learned that 70% of those killed in this war, this genocide in Gaza, which also includes the West Bank, where, by the way, Hamas does not play a role. 70% are women and children. So I don't know what number is enough. I don't know what number matches the eye for an eye. I don't know what is justice when you're talking about collective punishment. But I know what is righteous, and I know we're not seeing it. And so we have to live it. And this is Saturn moving through Pisces, imploring us for the next 2.5 years to find our spiritual motivation for living in this world, for finding putting together the spiritual context for this 3-dimensional world and living through that. So where have we not taken responsibility collectively? Where have we procrastinated and kicked the can down the road? This can also be, of course, individually. You definitely want to look at that. Look for wherever Saturn is in Pisces in your chart. I use the whole sign house system. So in this system, it's just going to be one place, but some of you like to use the quadrant houses like Placidus and Porphyry or Coke houses or whatever, and that might be in a couple of different places. I leave that to you to interpret, but look for that. Look for where Saturn is, 0 to 7 degrees of Pisces, and just a little bit on the edges of that before and after. And we also want to know where Jupiter is. So let's have a look also at what's going on with Jupiter. Jupiter rules Saturn while it's in Pisces. You'll see again more of that in the video that I did about Saturn in Pisces. So that would have been from, I think, February, maybe January, or maybe even last year. I can't remember. This year, I mean, honestly, let's face it, since COVID, time means nothing anymore. So I don't even know when that was, but it was before March anyway. So look for that video for more details, and then look for Jupiter in your chart. So that means you're looking for Taurus. Jupiter is currently at 10 degrees of Taurus. It is in opposition to the ascendant and sun, to Mars, and to Mercury, all of which are in Scorpio. In this particular chart, again, remember I'm using the chart for the Saturn Stationing Direct, right? So that's the 4th of November, 7 a.m. roughly in Universal Time. You fix that for your time, so that'll be 1 in the morning for East Coast North America. That will be later in the morning in Asia, for example, mid-morning in Europe. So with Jupiter on the descendant, Jupiter conjunct Uranus, this is volatile, and this is what this Jupiter is ruling Saturn from a place of being challenged in many, many ways. In Indian astrology, Jupiter and Venus don't get along. Now, Venus is ruling Jupiter. Venus herself is not terribly comfortable because Venus is actually in Virgo, which is ruled by this Mercury, which is equally uncomfortable, but squished in by Mars and opposite Uranus. So none of these planets are giving us their best. None of these planets are supporting what I would call right action, or what the Buddha would call right action, what is righteous. It's all just chaotic energy right now. I don't need to point that out to you, but I'm telling you how the astrology is pointing it out to you. It's just to say that we won't find clarity or answers for some time. We won't find really helpful solutions for some time. Even when Venus finally moves into her sign of Libra, which will just be a few days after Saturn Stations Direct. I think it's actually the 8th of November that Venus moves into Libra. Venus will be co-present with Ketu. So Venus in Libra, of course, is all about harmony and fairness and bringing connection, bringing results. But Ketu, the South Node, is not. It's about letting go. It's about something that is to be shed, something that is not really functional. And so Venus co-present with Ketu does not necessarily bring helpful results, and especially because at the moment, the North Node is still very strongly conjunct Eris, which is trouble. Eris is a troublemaker. There's no way around that. Eris is still in a square, it's a separating square, but it's 3.5 degrees of square with Pluto. And that's been a defining energy for the last year or two, for a long, long time. Eris energy squaring Pluto. Pluto still just now moving away from a very, very strong square with the nodes. We're in difficult times, and there's no point in pretending that this is going to be resolved quickly or in any way globally satisfactorily. We will be in a period of time which requires enormous faith and fortitude. And I'm not talking months, I'm talking years. So we're in a situation now where we are being called to the same tasks of courage, and resilience that our ancestors were called to. Don't forget that. You're here. If you're watching this and hearing me, it's because you're alive today due to ancestors who survived unspeakable things, challenges that we can only imagine or that we only ever saw in the films that we watch. So we have it in us, it's in our DNA. What we have to do is overcome our craving for comfort, overcome our aversion to difficulty, overcome our aversion to anything that makes us feel like we're not getting our way. This is life. This is life. We are not here to get our way. Even a toddler is not here to get their way. And if they do, they become narcissistic children and adults, and that's not helpful for any of us. So basically what we're looking at is a situation that is stuck for quite some time. The way I see it is that until Jupiter stations at 5 degrees, stations direct, which is the end of this year, and then starts to move direct back through Taurus, I think we're not going to really feel any real resolution, nothing particularly concrete that we can rely on. When Jupiter is stationing direct, Saturn will be in a sextile to Jupiter, and this can be very supportive. So currently they're not technically in a sextile, because sextile, the way I look at it, shouldn't really be more than 7 or 8 degrees apart. They're currently 10 degrees apart. So we're looking at the time when Saturn moves forward by the end of the year to 3 degrees. Jupiter is going to station and move forward at 5 degrees of Taurus, and that will be a strong sextile. Then there will be much more energy for real shift, real change. It's not to say that we should not advocate for that before. It's not to say that we should not attempt it in our own way, in our own lives before. But it is to say that it's not likely for our outer experience of life to settle very much in the next couple of months. And that applies to all conflicts that are happening right now, none of which are as they appear. Notice that the media in the last while, I'm not even going to give it a timeline, but let's say a couple of weeks, I don't know exactly the timeline, the media, which was vaunting certain figures like Vladimir Zelensky, the new Churchill, nothing but good things to say, now suddenly has nothing but bad things to say about this guy. So lo and behold, corruption in Europe's most corrupt country is starting to erode the situation, although it's not starting, it's just that they're talking about it openly now on mainstream media. Even the media that always gave cover to Israel for decades, regardless of the abuse, regardless of the hypocrisy, now is also showing what can't be denied, which is that we are witnessing a genocide. And things are changing. The global energy is shifting. And this particular moment in time is also showing us where the balance of power is shifting. As Pluto moves away from Capricorn, moving out of those last degrees, we are seeing the dying gasps of a unipolar world, of a Western-dominated world, of a world that has been dominated by corporatism and governments run amok. Now, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, I'm not sure that we're going to see the sunshine and flowers that everybody often talks about with Pluto going into Aquarius, because that is going to be a difficult time. This is about communal challenges. It's about challenges to the way that society is run. So the more that we build our resolve, the more that we build up our spiritual connection, our resilience, both materially as well as spiritually, the more that we are aware of what is going on, only with the sense of how to prevent wrongs and to live righteously, the easier that will be when Pluto moves through those 20 years of Aquarius. These are difficult times. There's no way around it. There's many things to say about the global situation. I do want to do videos about that. I haven't really had the time to look at that, but I know what I want to say about it, and there's a lot. So I will be posting videos in the days ahead about the institutions and certain countries that are affected at the moment. But basically, what we thought we could rely on institutionally and politically and even religiously is not there for us anymore. Saturn in Pisces, when it connects with Neptune at the end of Pisces and in the beginning of Aries, is going to be, for me, a symbol of a new religion, a new understanding of what is reliable. When church leaders, when very important spiritual leaders make no pleas, no comments of any weight around a genocidal event like this, we are really bereft of leadership. It's one thing for the venal, self-serving politicians who don't talk about anything except what serves them and their short-term interests. But when the so-called spiritual leaders of the world don't kick up a fuss, we need to do something about it then. We need to take over. So these are times where we cannot sit around and wait for somebody else to do something about it. North Node in Aries on an individual level says, you take action, you do something, show up in your life, do something. North Node in Aries is the second house from Saturn currently in the derived house system. And so when it's second to Saturn, we're taking actions based on our values to produce something livable within this world, in this three-dimensional world, from our belief system, from our spiritual connection, from our notion, from the knowing that we are all one. When we say we are all one, that's not a nice sort of catchphrase. It's true. It's not a concept. It is the absolute truth of life itself. We are one. And what happens to one of us has repercussions for all of us. And so if you're flying your little flags in support of one or another, or one but not another, look at that, because you can select these things. We are all in this. We are all the victims and perpetrators. We are all in the same basket. And when you project without reflecting back on yourself, you're bypassing. This is the essence of spiritual bypassing. You're faking it. So to really understand life is to know that you are responsible for everyone else's benefit, including yourself. You are responsible for acting in integrity. And when you don't, we all suffer. And this applies to all of us equally. I want to finish this up by saying that the moon is the only planet that is what I consider to be offering some kind of hope. Again, we've got the Venus opposite Neptune, but that can be quite delusional, potentially. The moon is in a sextile to Venus. That also can be a little bit wishful thinking, but let's take it. It's better than nothing. But most important, the moon is in the 9th house, where we want to feel happy. We want to find happiness. We want to find nurturing at this time. It's not always easy. And when the moon is in the 9th house, often it can actually be a cause of suffering, because our idea is that we should always be happy all the time. We should always want to be feeling good. And that's not the truth of life. And what is there to remind us It's, in fact, that Pluto opposite the moon, there to remind us that there's something that requires emotional transformation. It requires a transformation in the way that we care for each other, in the way that we nurture ourselves and others. It requires a deep examination of our psychological nature. Remember, the moon represents the mind. We have to look deeply at our psyche, look deeply at our emotionality, and try to understand where it is that we can do this work, that we can transform ourselves so that we can be better actors out in the world. The moon is in a trine, relatively weak trine to Neptune as well. And that is another potential for either emotionally falling apart and collapsing, or for not necessarily feeling resonating with the truth of what is going on. That wishful thinking is a real danger right now. And to recognize that Saturn in Pisces is about taking practical steps. It is really about understanding how to walk this earth as a spiritual being in a human body, and that requires showing up. And if you read any scripture, any literature of any spiritual value, you know that every single one of those humans, if there were indeed in some cases humans writing these things, or teams of humans or spiritual energies coming through humans, they all had some sort of suffering that brought them to what compassion, what desire for helping other people brought them to that place of spiritual understanding and contributing something so worthwhile that we're reading it hundreds, if not thousands of years later. So we are also capable of this. Our ancestors were capable of this. It's in our DNA. So show up, be here in this world. Don't avoid this world. We need everybody to show up, and we need everybody to live through values of integrity that are common to all. The golden rule is common to all religions, all faiths, because it is about oneness. The golden rule reflects our oneness, which is to do to each other as you would, or do to one another as we would have others do to ourselves. Just treat each other as you want to be treated. That's as simple a definition of unity or oneness, or all being one, as any religion has been able to distill. So I leave you with this thought of what to do in your own life, what to do collectively. It will require courage. It will require emotional transformation and maturity. It will require some self-reflection psychologically. Look where you're projecting, look where you're not taking responsibility for your own past trauma or emotions. If you stay stuck in it, you're going to spread it around. So it's better for everyone to go through it. The way out is in, as the saying goes. I wish you all much love and courage and compassion. These are difficult times, and we're somehow here for it. We somehow signed up for this. And so we're here for each other, and we're always here for a spiritual lesson that is much bigger than whatever small thing is happening in the day-to-day world. And there's something much bigger. Keep that bigger picture forever in your mind. Always know that there's something much bigger than even this singular life that is going on. And be a source of good in this world. Don't look to fix things so much as just to contribute in a good way, in a way that at the very least does not cause separation and harm to the people around you. So I wish you all the best. I will be back with a video about the Scorpio new moon and the other events that are coming up in the next weeks. Hang in there. We are all in this together. Much love to all of you.